The woman who sang with a voice so pure and sweet it made the world stand still, just lived through some of the most heartbreaking final years any music legend has ever faced. Ella Fitzgerald died in her Beverly Hills home from a stroke on June 15, 1996, at the age of 79. But the years leading up to that moment were filled with unimaginable pain and suffering that most people never knew about. This is the story of Ella Fitzgerald, the First Lady of Song, her incredible legacy, her hidden struggles, and her tragic final years. Ella Jane Fitzgerald was born on April 25, 1917 in Newport News, Virginia. Her parents were unmarried, but lived together in the East End section of Newport News for at least 2.5 years after she was born. But that family didn't last long. Her father left when she was very young, and in the early 1920s, Ella's mother and her new partner, a Portuguese immigrant named Joseph da Silva, moved to Yonkers, New York. Life in Yonkers wasn't easy. By 1925, Ella and her family had moved to School Street, a poor Italian area, and she began her formal education at the age of 6. Despite the poverty around her, young Ella was a good student. She attended public school 18 and then Benjamin Franklin Junior High School and did well in her classes. But everything fell apart when tragedy struck. In 1932, Ella's mother passed away after a car accident, leaving her grieving and without stability at just 15 years old. This was the moment that changed everything for young Ella. Possibly as a result of abuse from her stepfather, Ella moved to Harlem with her aunt. She couldn't handle the pain and the changes. She did not adjust well to her new reality and dropped out of school, running numbers and selling tickets for an illegal, mafia-run lottery to make money. The authorities caught her and she was sent to the New York State Training School for Girls, an institution for wayward or incorrigible young women. Overcrowding at the orphanage led to Ella's transfer to a reformatory school in Hudson, New York, an infamously abusive institution where she was denied permission to sing in the choir because of her race. 2 years later, a government investigation would expose that the black girls living at the school were housed in terrible conditions and were routinely beaten. Ella couldn't take it anymore. She ran away and was now homeless, being unable to return to her aunt's house because she might be caught. Ella was homeless for quite some time, shuffling alone through the streets of Harlem, singing and dancing for small change, sleeping wherever she could find a night's bed and board. But even in her darkest moments, Ella kept singing. On November 21, 1934, everything changed. She took part in the amateur night contest at the Apollo Theater. She had planned to dance, but when the frenzied Edwards sisters closed the main show, Ella changed her mind because they were the dancingest sisters around, and she felt her act would not compare. Once on stage, faced with boos and murmurs from the rowdy crowd, a scared and disheveled Ella made the last-minute decision to sing. She sang and the crowd went wild. She won first place and $25. That night launched one of the greatest careers in music history. Within a year, she met band leader Chick Webb, who gave her a chance to sing with his orchestra at the Savoy Ballroom in Harlem. In 1938, when she was just 21 years old, Ella earned her most widespread recognition when she released a version of the nursery rhyme, A Tasket, which became one of the best-selling records of the decade. The song sold over 1 million copies and made her famous overnight. After taking over the band when Webb died in 1939, Ella left it behind in 1942 to start her solo career. Through the 1940s and into the 1950s, Ella's star kept rising. She worked with the biggest names in jazz. She sang with Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Frank Sinatra, and Dizzy Gillespie. But her personal life was full of heartache. In 1941, Ella married Benny Cornegay, a convicted drug dealer and local dock worker, but the marriage was annulled in 1942 after discovering he had a criminal record. The presiding judge gave her a particularly demeaning reprimand, saying, "You go back to singing a tasket, and leave the boys alone." While touring with Dizzy Gillespie's band in 1946, she met and fell in love with bassist Ray Brown, and they married in December 1947. Ella and Ray Brown adopted a son, whom they named Ray Brown Jr., the child born to Ella's half-sister. But fame and constant touring destroyed this marriage too. Both Ella and Brown spent enormous amounts of time on the road with conflicting schedules, and their son Ray Jr. was spending more time with Ella's aunt than with his parents. The couple divorced in 1953, though they stayed friends for the rest of their lives. Their relationship with Ray Jr. was strained, although mother and son managed to reconcile when he was older, with Ray Jr. saying later, "All I can say is that she gave to me as much as she could, and she loved me as much as she could." The 1950s and 1960s became Ella's golden years professionally. Her manager, Norman Granz, created Verve Records around her, and from 1956 to 1964, she recorded the Songbook series. These albums, where she sang songs by Cole Porter, the Gershwins, Duke Ellington, and other great American composers, became her most important work. The New York Times wrote in 1996 that these albums were among the first pop records to devote such serious attention to individual songwriters. And they were instrumental in establishing the pop album as a vehicle for serious musical exploration. Ira Gershwin himself once said, Now let's talk about Ella's legacy and what she left behind. Ella Fitzgerald had a net worth of $10 million at the time of her death in 1996. Some people think that amount seems unjustly small in comparison with her achievements. For context, that's far less than many modern pop stars make in a single year. Why wasn't she worth more? Despite her immense talent and popularity, Ella faced significant challenges in her journey to building her fortune, often rooted in the systemic racism and sexism prevalent in the entertainment industry during much of her career. Like many artists of her era, she likely signed contracts that weren't always in her best financial interest. And the lack of transparency and power imbalances in the music industry could have limited her earnings initially. As a black female artist in a predominantly white male-dominated industry, Ella likely faced discrimination that impacted her compensation and opportunities. But she was smart with what she earned. Ella spent her last years in her Beverly Hills mansion in California. That house represented how far she had come from the streets of Harlem, where she once slept wherever she could find a place. Her money came from many sources. Her substantial fortune stemmed primarily from her prolific recording career and tireless touring schedule, with her extensive discography generating substantial royalties over the years. These recordings continued to sell and stream, generating ongoing revenue streams even after her passing. The Songbook albums are still selling, and with streaming and reissues, royalty payments continue to support her estate, with classics like Cheek to Cheek and Dream a Little Dream of Me remaining in constant rotation. Outside of the arts, Ella had a deep concern for child welfare and frequently made generous donations to organizations for disadvantaged youths. In 1993, Ella established the Ella Fitzgerald Charitable Foundation, focusing on charitable grants for 4 major categories: academic opportunities for children, music education, basic care needs for the less fortunate, and medical research revolving around diabetes, heart disease, and vision impairment. Even while suffering from diabetes herself and losing her legs to the disease, she was thinking about how to help others dealing with the same problems. The awards and honors Ella received tell the story of her impact. Her accolades included 14 Grammy Awards, the National Medal of Arts, the NAACP's inaugural President's Award, and the Presidential Medal of Freedom. She won every major award the music industry could give. She was recognized by presidents and kings. Universities gave her honorary doctorate degrees even though she had dropped out of school as a teenager. Her voice was studied in music schools. Her techniques were copied by singers around the world. But more than the awards and the money and the fame, Ella's real legacy is in how she changed music forever. Her clear tone and wide vocal range were complemented by her mastery of rhythm, harmony, intonation, and diction. She could sing anything. Jazz, ballads, blues, pop songs. Her infectious scat singing brought excitement to recordings and was widely imitated by others. She used her voice like an instrument, improvising and creating sounds that no one had heard before. Where Billie Holiday and Frank Sinatra lived out the dramas they sang about, Ella, viewing them from afar, seemed to understand and forgive all. Even when handed a sad song, Ella communicated a wistful, sweet-natured compassion for the heartache she described. What makes Ella's story so powerful is where she came from and what she overcame. Think about this journey. She was born to unmarried parents in 1917. Her father left. Her mother died when she was 15. She was abused. She was homeless. She was sent to a reform school where black girls were beaten and treated terribly. She ran away and lived on the streets of Harlem singing for spare change. She had nothing. No education, no family support, no money, no connections, just a voice. And that voice changed everything. From those streets in Harlem to performing for presidents and royalty. From sleeping wherever she could find a spot to owning a mansion in Beverly Hills. From being denied the right to sing in a choir because of her race to becoming the First Lady of Song. From having $25 in prize money to having a net worth of $10 million. From being a scared teenager on the Apollo stage to becoming one of the most awarded and respected musicians in history. That's the American dream. That's what happens when incredible talent meets determination and hard work. But the tragic part of Ella's story is how it ended. Her last few years, during which she had a bout with congestive heart failure and suffered bilateral amputation of her legs from complications of diabetes, were spent in seclusion. The woman who had lived for performing, who had given everything to her music and her audiences, spent her final years unable to do what she loved most. The diabetes she had dealt with for years finally took everything from her. Her mobility, her independence, her ability to perform, and finally, her life. Looking back at Ella Fitzgerald's life today, we see a woman of incredible strength and resilience. She survived poverty, abuse, homelessness, racism, failed marriages, strained family relationships, and devastating health problems. She worked harder than anyone, touring constantly even when her body was breaking down. She gave the world beauty through her voice while dealing with so much pain in her personal life. She became a legend while never forgetting to help others who were struggling like she once did. Her story teaches us important lessons. It shows that talent and hard work can overcome almost anything. It proves that your circumstances at birth don't have to define your future. It demonstrates that you can achieve greatness while still being a good person who gives back. It reminds us that even legends suffer and struggle in ways we never see. And it warns us about the price of success. About working so hard for so long that your body eventually breaks down. Ella Fitzgerald left us with over 200 albums and 2,000 songs. Every time someone plays Dream a Little Dream of Me or Summertime or A Tisket, A Tasket, her voice lives on. Every time a young singer learns to scat or studies how to phrase a lyric, they're learning from Ella. Every time someone talks about the greatest singers who ever lived, her name comes up. That's immortality. That's legacy. The tragic final years don't erase the triumphant life that came before them. Yes, Ella spent her last 3 years without her legs, confined to a wheelchair, unable to perform. Yes, she died too young at 79 after suffering for years. Yes, her story ended with pain and loss. But before that came 60 years of making the world more beautiful with her voice. Before that came achievements that most people can't even dream of. Before that came a journey from absolute poverty and homelessness to wealth and worldwide fame. Before that came a life that proved anything is possible. When Ella Fitzgerald died on June 15, 1996, the world lost one of its greatest voices. But it gained an eternal legend whose music will never die. From the scared homeless teenager singing on Harlem streets to the First Lady of Song performing for presidents, Ella's journey represents the very best of what humans can achieve when they refuse to let circumstances defeat them. Her legacy lives on not just in her recordings, but in every person who hears her story and thinks, if she could overcome all that, maybe I can overcome my struggles too. That's the real treasure Ella Fitzgerald left behind. Subscribe us for more video. Kindly like and share this.